Every 4 years since 1976, the U.S. Catholic bishops have issued a major statement on political responsibility. In November of 2015, they overwhelmingly adopted Forming Consciences for Faithful Citizenship, a call to political responsibility. You may already be familiar with the 2007 statement on Forming Consciences for Faithful Citizenship, to which an introductory note was added in 2011. You may be wondering, what's different about the 2015 statement? What's the same? In the words of the bishops in the introduction to the 2015 statement, they write, "This document consists mainly of the statement adopted overwhelmingly by the bishops in 2007, plus certain limited revisions by way of update. In particular, this version draws on the wealth of papal teaching since the 2007 version, such as the later magisterium of Pope Benedict XVI and that of Pope Francis to date. Specifically, they cite the inextricable link between our witness to the truth and our service to those in need, our role as missionary disciples called forth from the sanctuary to bring Christ to the margins with joy, and care for our common home and all who dwell in it, especially the poorest." This version also takes into account recent developments in the United States in both domestic and foreign policy. Finally, it organizes its themes around the 4 foundational principles of Catholic social teaching: human dignity, the common good, solidarity, and subsidiarity. More on these in a minute. But first, let's begin our summary by answering the question, what is Forming Consciences for Faithful Citizenship?
Forming Consciences for Faithful Citizenship provides a framework to guide political engagement, especially for U.S. Catholics. In the introduction to the statement, the bishops write, "This statement represents our guidance for Catholics in the exercise of their rights and duties as participants in our democracy. We urge our pastors, lay and religious faithful, and all people of goodwill to use this statement to help form their consciences, to teach those entrusted to their care, to contribute to civil and respectful public dialogue, and to shape political choices in the coming election in light of Catholic teaching." I've just described what the statement is. Now let's talk about what it isn't. The bishops write, "In this statement, we bishops do not intend to tell Catholics for whom or against whom to vote. Our purpose is to help Catholics form their consciences in accordance with God's truth. We recognize that the responsibility to make choices in political life rests with each individual in light of a properly formed conscience, and that participation goes well beyond casting a vote in a particular election. Faithful citizenship is not a voter's guide or a scorecard of issues. It doesn't offer direction on how to vote, tell Catholics who to vote for, or offer guidance on which candidate or party best reflects the Church's moral framework. Instead, it affirms the positive role of the Church and Catholics in political life. It shares Church teaching as a moral framework to help assess issues, political platforms, and campaigns. And it summarizes Church teaching on some of the important issues that face our communities and our world today. Faithful citizenship is a call to participate. In the first paragraph of their statement, the bishops quote Pope Francis, who writes in Evangelii Gaudium, "An authentic faith always involves a deep desire to change the world, to transmit values, to leave this earth somehow better than we found it. The earth is our common home, and all of us are brothers and sisters. If indeed the just ordering of society and of the state is a central responsibility of politics, the Church cannot and must not remain on the sidelines in the fight for justice. The Church has both a right and a duty to participate in public life. The Church's obligation to participate in shaping the moral character of society is a requirement of our faith," bishops write. And as Pope Francis reminds us in Evangelii Gaudium, the Church's pastors have the right to offer opinions in all that affects people's lives, since the task of evangelization implies and demands the integral promotion of each human being. As Americans, citizens of the world's most powerful democracy, we have the right and duty to bring our moral convictions to the public's arena. The inclusion of religious voices in public life enhances our nation's tradition of pluralism, which we value so dearly. This right and duty to participate is not only at the institutional level. It is a call for each one of us. In the Catholic tradition, responsible citizenship is a virtue, and participation in political life is a moral obligation. This participation is rooted, the bishops remind us, in our baptismal commitment to follow Jesus Christ and to bear Christian witness in all we do. The Catechism of the Catholic Church tells us that the obligation to participate is inherent in the dignity of the human person. Faithful citizenship is an opportunity for catechesis about discipleship. By our baptism, we become members of Christ's body and his mission to bring good news to the poor, liberty to captives, new sight to the blind, and to set the downtrodden free, as Jesus says in the Gospel of Luke, quoting the prophet Isaiah. As disciples of Christ, we are called to be instruments of grace, working to defend life, pursue justice, help make God's kingdom present, and heal the brokenness of the world. Our baptismal call includes our political and public responsibilities. There are many ways that Catholics in the pews can engage. The statement gives a few examples: running for office, working within political parties, communicating their concerns and positions to elected officials, and joining diocesan social mission or advocacy networks, state Catholic conference initiatives, community organizations, and other efforts to apply authentic moral teaching in the public square. Pope Francis notes in Evangelii Gaudium, and the bishops quote him in Forming Consciences for Faithful Citizenship, politics, though often denigrated, remains a lofty vocation and one of the highest forms of charity, inasmuch as it seeks the common good. I beg the Lord to grant us more politicians who are genuinely disturbed by the state of society, the people, the lives of the poor. Finally, it's important to point out that participation in the public square is not only the right and duty of citizens or people of voting age. Even those who cannot vote have the right to have their voices heard on issues that affect their lives and the common good. Anyone who lives in this country has the right and responsibility to participate in political life, perhaps not by voting or running for office, but certainly in working to ensure that the voices of the most vulnerable are heard so that the well-being of everyone can be realized. Pause for a moment to consider, and if you are gathered with others, to discuss. Why is participation in political life part of your baptismal call? How do you bring your faith values into the public square? In addition to being a call to participate, the statement is also a call to do exactly what its title says: form consciences. Conscience formation is essential so that Catholics are equipped to address the issues that face our world and communities. The process of forming consciences, which the bishops outline, involves approaching issues with an openness to seek the truth, studying sacred scripture and the teaching of the Church, examining facts and background information, and prayerful reflection. This is a call and invitation to families, pastors, religious educators, and others with a role in forming and guiding the Catholic faithful, not only young people, but all Catholics. Conscience formation is a lifelong task. Just as we need to form our consciences in light of Catholic teaching, we also have to cultivate the virtue of prudence. Prudence, the bishops write, shapes and informs our ability to deliberate over available alternatives, to determine what is most fitting to a specific context, and to act decisively. Exercising this virtue often requires the courage to act in defense of moral principles when making decisions about how to build a society of justice and peace. The statement is also a call to civility. At a time when we hear anything but civil and respectful dialogue among candidates, interest groups, super PACs, and even sometimes among family members, we have to be examples and witnesses of the civil and respectful dialogue we want to see, modeling the love and charity of disciples of Christ. The bishops note, we are committed to clarity about our moral teaching and to civility. In public life, it is important to practice the virtues of charity and justice that are at the core of our tradition. The bishops call for a renewed kind of politics, focused more on moral principles than on the latest polls, focused more on the needs of the weak than on benefits for the strong, and focused more on the pursuit of the common good than on the demands of narrow interests. The bishops identify two temptations that can impede our ability to authentically defend human life and dignity. I will quote directly from Numbers 28 and 29 here. The exact text says it best. The first temptation is a moral equivalence that makes no ethical distinctions between different kinds of issues involving human life and dignity. The direct and intentional destruction of innocent human life from the moment of conception until natural death is always wrong and is not just one issue among many. It must always be opposed. The second temptation is the misuse of these necessary moral distinctions as a way of dismissing or ignoring other serious threats to human life and dignity. The bishops continue, the current and projected extent of environmental degradation has become a moral crisis, especially because it poses a risk to humanity in the future and threatens the lives of poor and vulnerable human persons here and now. Racism and other unjust discrimination, the use of the death penalty, resorting to unjust war, the use of torture, war crimes, the failure to respond to those who are suffering from hunger or a lack of health care, pornography, redefining civil marriage, compromising religious liberty, or an unjust immigration policy are all serious moral issues that challenge our consciences and require us to act. These are not optional concerns which can be dismissed. Catholics are urged to seriously consider church teaching on these issues. Although choices about how best to respond to these and other compelling threats to human life and dignity are matters for principled debate and decision, this does not make them optional concerns or permit Catholics to dismiss or ignore. The bishops urge us to also remember that we have two duties, one negative and one positive. On the negative side, there are some things we must never do as individuals or as a society because they are always incompatible with the love of God and neighbor. These are called intrinsically evil actions. They must always be rejected and opposed and never must be supported or condoned. Examples they mention include the intentional taking of innocent human life, as in abortion and euthanasia, human cloning, destructive research on human embryos, genocide, torture, the targeting of non-combatants in acts of terror or war, racism, treating workers as mere means to an end, deliberately subjecting workers to subhuman living conditions, treating the poor as disposable, or redefining marriage to deny its essential meaning. At the same time, there is a second duty. Opposition to intrinsically evil acts which undercut the dignity of the human person should also open our eyes to the good we must do. That is, to our positive duty to contribute to the common good and to act in solidarity with those in need. They note that the right to life implies and is linked to other human rights, to the basic goods that every human person needs to live and thrive. All the life issues are connected, for erosion of respect for the life of any individual or group in society necessarily diminishes respect for all life. The moral imperative to respond to the needs of our neighbors, basic needs such as food, shelter, healthcare, education, and meaningful work, is universally binding on our consciences and may be legitimately fulfilled by a variety of means. The bishops conclude, both opposing evil and doing good are essential obligations. This guidance on temptations and duties is a reaffirmation of the unity of Catholic thought. The bishops warn, this document is to be read prayerfully and in its totality. It would be a serious mistake, and one that occurs with regrettable frequency, to use only selected parts of the Church's teaching to advance partisan political interests or validate ideological biases. All of us are called to be servants to the whole truth in authentic love, and it is our fervent hope and prayer that this document will provide aid to all those seeking to heed this call. Let's pause for a moment to consider, why is conscience formation important? How did the two temptations and two duties help us witness to the unity of Catholic thought? The bishops identify 4 overall principles of Catholic social teaching from the compendium of the social doctrine of the Church that can guide our approach to the issues. Within those overall principles, they point to specific themes of Catholic social teaching, which are identified by bold within the text. These bolded themes are what we are all familiar with as the 7 themes of Catholic social teaching. First, the dignity of the human person. As Catholics, we believe that human life is sacred and that the dignity of the human person is the foundation of a moral vision for society. This belief in the centrality of life and dignity guides our perspective on a multitude of issues, from abortion and euthanasia to racism, poverty, war, and the death penalty. Second, subsidiarity. Within this principle, the human person is not only sacred but also social, and our development as human beings takes place in relationship with others. We cannot promote human dignity without attending to the roles of families and community groups and associations. Public policy should strengthen families and uphold parents' rights and responsibilities to care for their children. We have a right and a duty to participate actively in shaping society and to promote the well-being of all, especially the poor and vulnerable. The bishops note in Forming Consciences for Faithful Citizenship, subsidiarity reminds us that larger institutions in society should not overwhelm or interfere with smaller or local institutions, yet larger institutions have essential responsibilities when the more local institutions cannot adequately protect human dignity, meet human needs, and advance the common good. Third, the common good, which is the sum total of social conditions which allow people, either as groups or as individuals, to reach their fulfillment more fully and more easily. The common good involves protecting human rights and meeting basic responsibilities as essential to respecting human dignity. It means our economic system must respect human dignity, the common good, the dignity of work, and the rights of workers. It means caring for creation as a duty of our faith and a sign of our concern for all people, especially those in poverty. Finally, the principle of solidarity reminds us that we are one human family, whatever our national, racial, ethnic, economic, and ideological differences. We are our brothers and sisters' keepers, wherever they may be. And loving our neighbor has global dimensions. This has implications for how we respond to immigrants and refugees, how we promote peace in a world marred by conflict, and how our society treats those who are weak, vulnerable, and most in need of preferential concern. Next, we will look at some of the specific policy issues that require our attention in response to these guiding principles and themes.
Now that we've considered some of the main principles and themes of Forming Consciences for Faithful Citizenship, we can turn to the second part of the document titled Applying Catholic Social Teaching. The bishops begin this section with a few important observations. They write, "To engage in politics is more than getting involved in current polemics and debates. It is about acting with others and through institutions for the benefit of all. In our democracy, one aspect of this task for all of us requires that we weigh issues and related policies. In this brief summary, they conclude, we bishops call attention to issues with significant moral dimensions that should be carefully considered." Perhaps it's good to remember as well from earlier in the document that this statement is intended to reflect and complement, not substitute for, the ongoing teaching of bishops in our own dioceses and states. The bishops organize the policy issues under 13 topics or headings. Given their number, I'll have to run through them rather quickly. Of course, this means we'll not be able to treat any of them with the proper depth. For that, we recommend that you read Forming Consciences for Faithful Citizenship for yourself, consult the other bishops' documents on specific issues. Those documents are listed at the end of Forming Consciences, and also visit our website for a host of other resources. Now let's take a brief look at the 13 topics the bishops use to organize their policy considerations. The first topic is human life. As the bishops write, our conference supports laws and policies to protect human life to the maximum degree possible. They list a number of areas of policy concern, including opposition to abortion, assisted suicide and euthanasia, the cloning and destruction of human embryos, genocide, torture, and the direct and intentional targeting of non-combatants in war or terrorist attacks. They also support efforts that combat hunger, disease, poverty, and violence. Finally, they write, because we have other ways to protect society that are more respectful of human life, the USCCB supports efforts to end the use of the death penalty and in the meantime to restrain its use. The next heading is promoting peace. Here the bishops write, war is never a reflection of what ought to be, but a sign that something more true to human dignity has failed. The Catholic tradition recognizes the legitimacy of just war teaching when defending the innocent in the face of grave evil, but we must never lose sight of the cost of war and its harm to human life. The policy concerns that are listed under this heading include efforts to avoid war and to promote peace, opposition to terrorism and torture, and the indiscriminate or disproportionate use of military force. The bishops also mention efforts to reverse the spread of nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons. Under the topic of marriage and family life, the bishops state, the family founded upon marriage is the basic cell of human society. The role, responsibilities, and needs of families should be central to national priorities. This means that marriage must be defined, recognized, and protected as a lifelong exclusive commitment between a man and a woman, and as the source of the next generation and the protective haven for children. It also includes promoting pro-family policies on taxes, work, divorce, immigration, welfare, and a family wage, as well as opposition to abortion and contraception mandates. The bishops state their concerns about religious freedom as follows. U.S. policy should promote religious liberty vigorously, both at home and abroad. Our first and most cherished freedom is rooted in the very dignity of the human person, a fundamental human right that knows no geographical boundaries. Another topic that the bishops consider is the preferential option for the poor and economic justice. Here they write, the economy must serve people, not the other way around. Economic decisions and institutions should be assessed according to whether they protect or undermine the dignity of the human person. There are many policy concerns related to this topic. They include policies that help job creation, ensure just wages, oppose employment discrimination, defend policies that reduce poverty, and others that you can see listed on the screen. In the area of healthcare, the bishops assert that affordable and accessible healthcare is an essential safeguard of human life and a fundamental human right. The nation's healthcare system needs to be rooted in values that respect human dignity, protect human life, respect the principle of subsidiarity, and meet the needs of the poor and uninsured. In terms of policy, this includes a call for health care for all, especially born and unborn children, pregnant women, immigrants, and other vulnerable populations. It calls for conscience protections, the strengthening of Medicare and Medicaid, and special care for HIV/AIDS victims and persons with addictions. Under the heading of migration, the bishops remind us of the gospel mandate to welcome the stranger, which calls all Catholics to care for and stand with newcomers. This means supporting policies that care for unaccompanied immigrant children, refugees and asylum seekers, those unnecessarily detained, and victims of human trafficking. It also includes a call for comprehensive immigration reform that, as the bishops write, offers a path to citizenship, treats immigrant workers fairly, prevents the separation of families, maintains the integrity of our borders, respects the rule of law, and addresses the factors that compel people to leave their own countries. Another topic the bishops address is Catholic education. They write, parents, the first and most important educators, have a fundamental right to choose the education best suited to the needs of their children, including public, private, and religious. And all persons have a right to receive a quality education. In terms of policy, this means supporting parental choice in education, advocating for quality education for all, including persons who are poor or disabled, and ensuring access for private and religious schools to the tools and services their students need. The bishops also consider policies that promote moral responsibility and effective responses to violent crime in light of what they call a growing culture of violence. This includes policies that seek to curb violence in media, that promote reasonable restrictions on assault weapons and handguns, and work to reform the criminal justice system. Another priority for the bishops is combating unjust discrimination. In their words, it is important for our society to continue to combat any unjust discrimination, as these are grave injustices and affronts to human dignity. The Bishops' Conference therefore continues to combat discrimination based on race, religion, sex, ethnicity, disabling condition, or age, to support policies that remove barriers to education, protect voting rights, and support good community policing. They continue to advocate for equal employment for women and minorities. Another topic of concern is titled Care for Our Common Home. The bishops insist that care for creation is a moral issue. We must answer the question that Pope Francis posed to the world: what kind of world do we want to leave to those who come after us, to children who are now growing up? With this in mind, the bishops support policies that, for example, conserve energy, encourage the development of alternative, renewable, and clean energy resources, address global climate change, and contribute to sustainable development of poorer nations. Under the heading of communications, media, and culture, the bishops write, print, broadcast, and electronic media shape the culture. Therefore, the bishops call for responsible regulation, quote, that respects freedom of speech, yet also addresses policies that have lowered standards, permitted increasingly offensive material, and reduced opportunities for non-commercial religious programming, end quote. As further examples, they also support efforts to expand internet availability and enforce obscenity and child pornography laws. The last topic the bishops address is global solidarity. They explain this as follows. The increasing interconnectedness of our world calls for a moral response, the virtue of solidarity. Our nation should help to humanize globalization, addressing its negative consequences and spreading its benefits, especially among the world's poor. Of the many policy concerns in this area, we might mention the bishops' efforts to address poverty and underdevelopment, work for equitable trade policies, and protect religious liberty and basic human rights throughout the world. I hope this brief summary of some of the issues has been helpful. On the following slides, you see a few examples of how the bishop's teaching is applied in areas that affect human life and dignity. We'll briefly discuss some of the resources available to help you engage these issues at a deeper level. But before we do that, we want to offer a few questions for your consideration. Finally, I just want to mention a few things that you as a Catholic institution can do and some that you can't do. As a Catholic institution, here are just some of the things that you can do. Address the moral and human dimensions of public issues, share church teaching on human life, human rights, and justice and peace, apply Catholic values to legislation and public issues, conduct a nonpartisan voter registration drive on church property. Here are some of the things you should not do. Endorse or oppose candidates for political office, distribute partisan campaign literature under church auspices, arrange for groups to work for a candidate for public office, invite only selected candidates to address your church-sponsored group, conduct voter registration slated toward one party. In all of these cases, be sure to check with your diocesan or organizational attorney if you have any questions about what is appropriate. You can also consult the IRS for guidance at this website.
So now you know what it takes to be a faithful citizen, but what should you do next? Visit the Faithful Citizenship website at faithfulcitizenship.org to access materials and resources that you can use to spread the word and educate others. At this website, there are resources for a variety of audiences, including videos and other top resources that you may find useful. This Novena for Faithful Citizenship, as well as the suggestions for liturgy and prayer, can help Catholics pray for issues that affect our brothers and sisters at home and around the world. Several bulletin inserts are available, including 2 inserts summarizing the statement, and bulletin inserts on conscience formation, civil dialogue, and how to contact your elected officials. The site contains do's and don'ts during election season, tips for conducting a candidate forum, and voter registration guidelines. There are also homily helps for 4 Sundays during 2016, in the lead up to the presidential elections. Most resources are available in Spanish. Additionally, the wearesaltandlight.org website from the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, Department of Justice, Peace, and Human Development contains a number of helpful resources for engaging Catholics as faithful citizens year-round. wearesaltandlight.org includes over 60 stories of how Catholic faith communities around the country are praying, reaching out, learning about issues, and acting together through advocacy and other means. For example, a youth group at St. Catherine of Siena Catholic Church in Texas organizes prayer for the parish community every time an execution takes place, witnessing to our Catholic commitment to protect the human life and dignity of all God's children. And at the University of Notre Dame's Center for Social Concerns, students learn advocacy skills and then take on local, national, and even international issues, meeting with legislators during the semester to advocate. The wearesaltandlight.org website also has great resources for election year and non-election year. For example, the Encounter tab in the Reach Out Together section has helpful resources such as a guide to dialogue on difficult issues and questions to facilitate encounter. Finally, you can go to the very bottom of the USCCB webpage to get more information on issues and topics that interest you from various offices, including justice, peace, and human development, pro-life activities, migration and refugee services, Catholic education, the Catholic Campaign for Human Development, and others. So, what will you do to help your family, friends, or faith community participate in public life, guided by the values of our faith?